there's something interesting about the Super Tenere, and when you compare the horsepower to, say, the KTM 1190, the KTM 1190, I didn't realize this, was so much more high horsepower. That's why people really like it, because it gets, I think it's 145 horsepower. The Super Tenere that I'm riding now from 2012, 2013 is rated at 108 horsepower, as opposed to the 1190 at 145. That is kind of incredible. The Yamaha R1s of the early 2000s were making about 160 horsepower, so you can imagine an adventure bike with that sort of horsepower is pretty crazy. And I do like horsepower, but I think the reason this bike is so reliable is that Yamaha detuned it from making much more horsepower. You could get the Super Tenere to make a lot of horsepower, but because the horsepower is so detuned that it's easy to not have any issues with the engine. 108 horsepower is actually pretty weak of a bike, but don't despair, because the Super Tenere, even though it's only got 108 horsepower, it makes more torque than the KTM with its 145 horsepower. This bike is a better bike for, I think, everyday type of riding. And I think when you get a bike that's detuned, sure, it doesn't win any races, it's not as fast as the KTM, it's not as fun, but the one thing you can count on this bike is just simply to get you where you need to be. Of course, you need to fill it up with gas, because it's kind of a, you know, a gas hog in my opinion. Let's see how much fuel I have. 4.739, and I have 4.7 gallons on this gas tank. It's been really low. Like, I have 6 gallons. So apparently this Super Tenere, it's got a little bit of an issue. Not really an issue, but you have to... So one of the mods that people do is they remove the fuel pump, and then there's a sensor, and then you bend the wire, because apparently there's a lot of fuel in the reserve of the gas tank. And if you don't want a reserve that gets 60 miles, 70 miles, you're basically... you can just change that, and I think that's what I might do. But today I want to go for a ride, and I'm going to compute my miles based on my GPS. I've reset the GPS. So the first thing about the Super Tenere, that it's just really big up in the front. I think for me, the biggest surprise was that it moved so much easier than my FJR 1300, and it moved better, it handles better than the FJR, and even when you're pushing it around, it feels lighter and much more maneuverable than the FJR. The FJR with the clip-ons and stuff, I don't know, it's just a very old school bike, the whole sport touring thing. And yeah, the FJR is faster than this. I mean, that FJR really is a rocket, but I can't see myself really using the power that any sport touring bike has, and I've gotten in trouble before for riding way too fast on those sport touring bikes, because they are indeed fast. And I think even guys that get those, who are generally not in the demographic of being in crotch rocket territory, they will get in trouble, because those bikes are just so unbelievably fast, and they're smooth, and they seem like they're not really moving. This one, you still have that speed sensation, but it's a lot less, and you basically kind of feel like, oh yeah, I am going faster. My Ninja 250 was the opposite way. It's like I was going 30, it felt like I was going 100, and it was perfect for not getting speeding tickets. This one, I don't know, I do see myself getting in trouble, because it is very smooth. The wind protection on this is extremely great. The FJR's wind protection was much better. It is 45 degrees, and of course, if you've ridden a motorcycle and it's like 45 degrees, that means that it's like 20 degrees colder. So it really feels like it's 20 degrees as you're riding. There's a woman behind me, and I don't know what she's up to. She is... Whoa, she is like running into me. What is up with this lady? What is up with this fucking lady? She is in a hurry, and she almost like ran into me. 3EB7799, Maryland plates. This woman is up to no good. That was really odd. It's as if like she was definitely like rushing somewhere, but she seemed like an okay person, but I think she wanted to pass everybody on the broken yellow, and then she wanted to turn left. She turned left behind me, but she almost ran into me. Like I was looking at her because I think she ran the red light behind, and she was like tailgating me, and then like she went back, and then she was trying to pass. There was something very odd about that car. She seemed distraught, as if her house was on fire or one of her kids was on fire. The roads are pretty cold, so I usually don't like to take corners very fast when I am when it's cold out, and my tires are pretty darn cold. I mean, even though it's I think what, 43, it's above freezing. Yeah, you shouldn't be taking corners too fast. And I haven't really gotten to really practice with this bike. It does feel a little bit slower going into corners than the V-Strom. The V-Strom was like, man, amazing handling. You know, here's the downside of riding through the weekdays when people are at work. You have to deal with FedEx and Amazon trucks all the time. When you get on an older bike, or even like a V-twin like the V-Strom, there is a little bit more vibration. But this thing, I mean, you do have almost like superpower if you rev the bike up quite a bit, but it just kind of pulls you because it's more of a tractor than a bike. It's absolutely freezing. My hands are just like wrinkling up like little prunes. The FJR had better wind protection though, but it was also significantly heavier than this one, or at least it felt it. With GoPros, if you charge them 100% and you go for a ride and it's like freezing, well, the battery dies almost instantly. When it comes to this bike, it handles just as well as any other adventure bike. I think you do have a little bit more massive weight, but I don't know, the weight, it almost seems V-Strom like. The V-Strom is a little bit better, but you have like 50 more horsepower than the V-Strom, plus you have a shaft drive. You know, another bike that's very good as a, you know, not an adventure bike, but is a Concours. You can get like an old Concours with a shaft drive, and then you have a very competent, very old school, I like the early 90s, early 2000s Concours, as opposed to like those ugly Kawasaki ones. You know, Kawasaki is the least favorite of Japanese bikes. I think they kind of skip out a little bit on the fit and finish. Yeah, this bike so far has been really good. I think there's a couple of things I want to install, like the heated grips, because I mean, now even in the summertime it's nice to have heated grips. The V-Strom suspension was very budget-like, and I think that's kind of like what you get for having a Suzuki. Like, they'll just basically give you a really great engine and transmission and a bike that's not going to be falling apart. But when it comes to suspension, Suzuki, Kawasaki kind of skips out. Honda and Yamaha do better. And there's like this, idea that you can do everything with an adventure bike. I like that. Okay, it is a bike that I don't really feel the need to buy a sport bike, because this bike does handle just as well as a sport bike. That's the beauty of the V-Strom. It's so light, the motor's so lively, that you can ride that bike as fast as any sport bike in the twisties. You hear the motor when I crack it open. Listen to the motor. That sounds awesome. Yeah, this Super Tenere makes one of the better bargains. I mean, $4,000, $5,000, and you can have something this quality. It boggles the mind. Whew, 43 degrees, man. My hands are freezing. This is bike life, but this is bike life with an S. It's not bike life with a Z. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.